I want to tell you about a Tuesday afternoon in March when a stranger called my house and accidentally handed me the truth I had been living inside of without knowing it. It was 2:47 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I was at my desk, working through a quarterly audit report, and I had just glanced at the clock wondering if I had time to make a second cup of coffee before my 4 o'clock call. The landline rang. Yes, we still had a landline, one of those small domestic details that becomes a strange artifact in a story like this. And I picked it up without thinking. The voice on the other end was a man's voice. Polished, professional, slightly hurried. He said, "Hi, is this the Webb residence? I'm trying to confirm travel arrangements with Nathan Webb for the Chicago conference." I said, "Yes, this is his wife. Can I help you?" A pause, not a long one. Just a fraction of a second that felt, in retrospect, like the universe drawing a breath before something irreversible. He said, "Oh, I was just calling to make sure the booking was correct. We have Nathan and a +1 on the flight Thursday morning. I just wanted to confirm he received the updated itinerary with both seat assignments." I said, very carefully, "A +1?" He said, "Yes, ma'am, for the Chicago trip." I said, "Of course, I'll let him know." And then I hung up the phone and stood very still in my kitchen for a moment that I cannot accurately measure in minutes. Because time does something strange when the architecture of your life cracks all at once and you're standing inside it, listening to the sound it makes. My name is Celeste Webb. I am 41 years old. I am a forensic accountant, which means, in plain terms, that I spend my professional life following money. I find what people try to hide. I reconstruct what people try to destroy. I build timelines from paper trails, and I present those timelines in courtrooms and boardrooms to people who need the truth laid out precisely and completely. I am, by both training and deep personal temperament, a woman who does not panic. I identify the problem, I locate the evidence, and I build the case. I had been married to Nathan Webb for 11 years. We lived in a 4-bedroom house in Franklin, Tennessee, a suburb of Nashville, with 2 golden retrievers named Biscuit and Earl, and a backyard that Nathan had spent 3 weekends building a deck on the summer we moved in. He worked in corporate consulting, strategy and organizational restructuring for mid-size companies. He traveled frequently. More than I liked, honestly, but I understood it was the nature of the work, and I trusted him, the way you trust someone you have chosen every single morning for 11 years. I want to say that plainly and without apology. I trusted Nathan Webb completely. The love was real. The trust was genuine. It was not the trust of a naive woman who couldn't see what was in front of her. It was the trust of a person who had no evidence pointing to any other conclusion. Until the Tuesday in March when a stranger called my house to confirm a flight for 2. Let me tell you what I did next, because it matters. I did not cry. I did not call Nathan and scream at him. I did not call my best friend and spiral into a 3-hour conversation that would feel good but accomplish nothing. I sat back down at my desk, opened a fresh spreadsheet, and I began to work. Because here is what 11 years of forensic accounting teaches you. Emotion is expensive. Evidence is free. The truth is almost always available if you know where to look and you're willing to look patiently. And I was patient. Lord, I was patient. The first thing I did was pull up our joint credit card statements going back 18 months. Nathan handled most of our finances, not because I couldn't, obviously, but because he liked to, and because I trusted him, and because there had never been a reason to look closely. I had full access to everything. I had simply never used it. I started with the travel expenses, because that's where the story begins in almost every case I have worked professionally. People are sloppy about travel. Hotels, flights, restaurants, these leave clear, dateable, locatable records. And Nathan traveled for work at least twice a month, sometimes more. The first thing that caught my eye was a hotel charge from 8 months earlier. The Lowe's Vanderbilt in Nashville, a one-night stay. Nathan had told me that week he was in Atlanta for a restructuring meeting with a manufacturing company. The charge was on a Thursday. The hotel is 11 minutes from our house. I sat back and looked at that line item for a long time. Then I started building the spreadsheet in earnest. I created columns: date, stated location, actual charge location, amount, category. I went back 2 years, then 3. It took me 4 days to complete the audit, working in the evenings after Nathan went to bed. My laptop dimmed low at the kitchen table. What I found was this. Over 37 months, there were 62 charges that did not match the location Nathan had told me he was in. Not dramatically, not Vegas when he said Denver, but subtly. A Nashville hotel when he said Atlanta. A charge at a restaurant in Memphis when he said he was in Birmingham. A weekend conference in Knoxville with hotel charges for 2 nights, and a spa treatment billed to his personal card that I only found because he had accidentally forwarded me the wrong confirmation email 8 months ago, and I had filed it away without really reading it. 62 data points over 37 months. Each one, in isolation, had a possible innocent explanation. Taken together, they told a story with only one coherent interpretation. I named the spreadsheet Nathan Reconciliation File. Then I locked it with a password he would never guess. The Thursday of the Chicago trip, I drove Nathan to the airport myself. He had offered to take an Uber, but I insisted. I told him I wanted coffee from the airport Starbucks anyway, which was true. We drove the 40 minutes mostly in comfortable silence, the kind that develops between two people who have shared enough mornings that silence doesn't need to be filled. At the departure's drop-off, he kissed me on the cheek and said, "I'll call you when I land." I said, "Safe travels." I watched him walk through the sliding glass doors with his rolling carry-on and his laptop bag, and I felt something I can only describe as the last moment of a certain kind of innocence. Not for him, I had already moved well past that point. For me, for the woman I was about to stop being, I parked the car in the short-term lot. I went inside. I didn't go to Starbucks. I went to the departures board. His flight was on United, gate B14. I found a seat in the terminal with a sightline to the gate, and I waited. I had brought a book I didn't read. I had brought my laptop, which I opened and stared at without processing anything on the screen. 40 minutes later, I saw her. She was maybe 32, 33. Dark hair pulled back. A neat blazer, slim black pants, rolling a carry-on that matched Nathan's in a way that suggested they had been purchased together. She walked up to the gate area and Nathan was already there. And when she approached, he did not look up the way you look up when an acquaintance or colleague arrives. He looked up the way you look up when you have been waiting for someone specific. He smiled. She smiled. She sat down beside him, and he said something that made her laugh, and she tucked her head briefly against his shoulder in the way of someone who has done that 10,000 times and doesn't think twice about it. I sat 40 feet away behind an open laptop, and I watched my husband with a woman I had never seen before, and I understood with the complete and precise clarity of a fact that cannot be argued with that I was looking at the other half of something that had been going on for a very long time. I took 3 photographs on my phone. Not out of any immediate plan, I didn't have a plan yet. But I have spent my career building cases, and you build cases with evidence, and the habit is bone deep. Then I stood up, closed my laptop, and walked back to my car. I called my attorney on the drive home. Her name is Diane Hollies, and she has practiced family law in Nashville for 26 years. She is exactly the kind of woman you want in your corner when you are about to take apart an 11-year marriage. Precise, thorough, deeply unsentimental about the process while remaining genuinely kind about the person. I told her what I knew. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Tell me what outcome you're looking for." I told her. I wanted an accurate accounting of 11 years of shared financial life. I wanted our assets divided fairly, and I wanted to know if any marital funds had been diverted for the purposes of this second relationship. I told her what I did for a living, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Then you already know what to do." She was right. Over the following 6 weeks, I conducted the most thorough financial audit of my marriage. I was methodical. I was relentless. I was entirely calm, the way I am calm in every professional investigation I conduct, because this was now, in every meaningful sense, a professional investigation. What I found was worse than I had initially anticipated. The hotel stays and restaurant charges were the surface layer. Beneath that, Nathan had opened a personal savings account 14 months ago at a bank where we did not have joint accounts, funded by systematic transfers from a consulting business account that was in his name only. Over 14 months, he had moved approximately $214,000 into this account. He had then used approximately $160,000 of that, some across various expenditures. Rent payments to a downtown Nashville luxury apartment building, a car lease for a vehicle I had never seen, multiple large charges at a jewelry retailer, 2 international trips that did not appear anywhere on our joint accounts. And this is the one that required me to set down my pen and breathe slowly for several minutes. a partial down payment on a property in Brentwood, Tennessee, made jointly with a woman whose name appeared on the deed documentation as Lee Garrison. $214,000, the majority of which was generated by consulting contracts that Nathan had landed during our marriage, using professional relationships he had built in part through the stability and support our marriage provided. I built it all into a document: spreadsheets, bank records, property records, which are public in Tennessee, credit card statements, the photographs from the airport, a timeline going back 3 years, cross-referenced with the inconsistencies in his stated travel locations. Deanne reviewed everything and called me the following morning. "Celeste," she said, "this is one of the most thoroughly documented marital financial cases I have seen in 26 years. I said, "I know what I'm doing." She said, "I know you do. Here's what happens next." Want to tell you about the moment I decided how this would end, because the how matters enormously in a situation like this. I could have confronted Nathan at home. I could have laid the documents on our kitchen table, the same kitchen table where we had eaten 11 years of breakfasts together, and had a private reckoning. That was the obvious choice, the expected one, but I kept thinking about something else. Nathan had been working for the previous 4 months on a major consulting contract with Meridian Capital Group, a regional investment firm headquartered in Nashville. The engagement had been significant, roughly $800,000 in consulting fees over an 18-month period, and Nathan had been angling for a permanent advisory board position that would have meant both ongoing income and a significant professional credential. He had talked about it constantly. He was due to present his final strategic recommendations to the Meridian board in 2 weeks. Deanne and I discussed it. She was careful, as she should have been. "You have every right to confront this privately," she said. "But if Meridian is aware that their advisory candidate has been using potentially fraudulent business account transfers to fund a secret personal life, that's information that may affect their decision." I said, "The transfers from the consulting account are those legally problematic," she said. "They are certainly worth discussing with a forensic accountant." We looked at each other over the conference table. "Fortunately," I said, "I am one." Consulting account transfers had a problem. Nathan's business account had received payments from Meridian as part of the consulting retainer, money paid for specific, documented deliverables. When Nathan transferred funds from that account to his personal savings account, he did so in amounts and at intervals that, viewed carefully, appeared designed to obscure the transfers from any routine review. Whether that rose to the level of financial fraud was a question for lawyers. But it was certainly the kind of information a board of directors would want before offering someone a permanent advisory position. Diane reached out to the general counsel at Meridian Capital Group, not with accusations, with documentation. She presented the financial records professionally and completely, with a cover note explaining that these were matters relevant to an ongoing divorce proceeding involving one of their consultants, and that Meridian might wish to conduct their own internal review before finalizing any permanent engagement agreements. We did not have to wait long for a response. The Meridian board meeting was on a Wednesday. I know this because Nathan left the house that morning in his best suit, the charcoal Tom Ford that he reserved for high-stakes presentations. He was in good spirits, confident. He kissed me on the forehead and said he'd probably be home late because the partners liked to celebrate after a successful board session. I said, "I hope it goes exactly the way you're expecting." He smiled. He had no idea. I was in Diane's office when her phone rang at 4:15 in the afternoon. She listened for a moment, said a few words I couldn't hear, and then set the phone down. She looked at me across the conference table. "They confronted him at the board meeting," she said. "They presented the financial records and asked him to explain the transfer pattern. He initially tried to characterize them as routine business expense management." She paused. Then their general counsel walked in with the bank records Diane had provided, and Nathan apparently stopped talking. I was quiet for a moment. "You know I was involved?" I asked. "Until that moment," Diane said. "Apparently when he saw my name on the documentation, he understood." I sat with that for a few seconds. 11 years. He had looked across a conference room table at the evidence of his own double life, assembled by the woman who had trusted him completely, and he had understood that it was over. What happened next? I asked. Meridian terminated the consulting engagement effective immediately. "They're doing an internal review. The advisory board position has been withdrawn." I nodded. I wasn't happy exactly. I don't think happy is the right word for what I felt in that moment. It was more like completion. The sense of a thing having landed exactly where it was always going to land. Send him the divorce papers tonight, I said. Diane nodded. Already drafted. Nathan came home that evening at 6:15, not late as he had predicted. He came in through the garage door and stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment. I was at the kitchen island with a cup of tea and my laptop, exactly as I was on 100 ordinary evenings. He looked at me and he knew. I could see it in the way his body changed, the particular quality of stillness that comes over a person when they understand the game has already ended and they are only now walking into the final scene. He said, "How long have you known?" I said, "Since the Tuesday in March when a client called the house to confirm a flight for 2. You were supposed to be traveling alone." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he sat down at the kitchen table, the same table, the one we had eaten 1,000 breakfasts at, and he said, "Her name is Lee." I said, "I know her name. I know the address of the apartment you've been paying for. I know about the Brentwood property. I know about the $214,000. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Celeste. I know it doesn't cover it, but I am." I looked at him across the table. This man I had chosen. This man I had trusted. I felt grief. I will not pretend I didn't because I am not made of stone, and 11 years of genuine love does not evaporate in a moment, even when it should. I felt the specific grief of losing not just a person, but a version of reality you had believed in completely and without reservation. But beneath the grief, I felt something else. Something steady and clear and entirely mine. I said, "The divorce papers will be delivered tonight. Diane's number is in the documents. I'd recommend you call an attorney before you respond to anything." He said, "Celeste," I said, "I'm going to take Biscuit and Earl for a walk. When I come back, I'd like you to have made arrangements to stay somewhere else tonight." I stood up. I clipped the leashes onto 2 very confused golden retrievers who could sense something enormous in the room without understanding what it was. I walked out the back door. The spring evening was cool and clear and smelled like the neighbors' wisteria, which came on every year in late March without fail. I walked 2 blocks before I stopped on the sidewalk and stood very still and let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Then I took a breath. And another. And I kept walking. The divorce took 9 months. I will not pretend it was easy, because it was not. There were difficult weeks, difficult conversations, a mediation session in October that left me sitting in my car in a parking garage for 45 minutes before I could drive home. Grief does not follow a clean arc, even when you are the person who is right. But the financial settlement was precisely what it should have been. Diane and I had built an airtight case. The $160,000 Nathan had spent on his second life was treated as dissipation of marital assets. The Brentwood property, which had been purchased with funds partly traceable to the consulting account, became subject to the divorce settlement. Nathan did not fight it because he could not fight it. I had documented everything and he knew it. I kept the house in Franklin. I kept Biscuit and Earl. I kept my career, which had never faltered even through the worst of it because I am a forensic accountant and I know how to compartmentalize the way other people breathe. I did not contact Lee Garrison. I thought about it in the early days and decided against it. Not out of cruelty, I hold no particular bitterness toward her. She had been lied to by the same person who had lied to me, and the specific content of his lies to each of us was almost certainly designed to keep each of us from looking too closely at the full picture. That is what practiced liars do. They build separate theaters and keep the stages far enough apart that the performances never bleed into each other, until someone calls the wrong phone number. It has been 2 years since the Tuesday in March. The house in Franklin is mine in a way it never quite was when it was shared, not because Nathan's presence diminished it, but because the act of keeping something, of choosing it deliberately and with full knowledge of what you're choosing, changes the quality of the belonging. My mother's sister came to visit last summer and walked through the back door and stopped at the sight of the deck Nathan had built and said, carefully, "Do you want to tear it down?" And I thought about it. I really did. And then I said no. Because the deck is well built and functional, and the dogs love to sleep on it in the afternoon sun, and I am not interested in erasing what was real simply because it was also complicated. I was promoted 6 months ago to senior partner at my firm. It is the thing I have worked toward for 12 years, and when my name went on the door, I stood in the hallway outside my new office for a moment alone and felt the specific satisfaction of something earned through consistent, patient, deliberate effort. I had dinner last month with a man I met at a professional conference. He is a tax attorney from Atlanta who argues with me about accounting methodology and makes very good pasta from scratch. It is new and careful and nothing is promised. But it is real. I think about that phone call sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and the dogs are asleep at the foot of the bed. A stranger called the wrong number and handed me the truth. In a different life, I might have chosen not to follow where it led. I might have set the spreadsheet aside, talked myself into a different interpretation, chosen the comfort of not knowing over the disruption of finding out. I didn't do that. Not because I am brave, I am not sure bravery is the right word for it, but because I am a woman who has spent her entire career in the belief that the truth is not the enemy. The truth is the only thing you can build on. Everything else, every comfortable assumption, every convenient story, every lie you tell yourself to avoid the difficulty of what is real, is sand. You can build a very convincing-looking structure on sand. You can live in it for years and feel the floor beneath your feet and not notice that anything is wrong, until you do. And then the only question is what you do next. I know what I did next. I opened a spreadsheet, and I followed the money, and I built the case, and I waited until the moment was exactly right. And then I let the truth land where it was always going to land. Some people, when they hear my story, say they feel sorry for me. For the years I didn't know. For the mornings I cooked breakfast for a man who was living a second life 2 miles away. For the trust I gave completely and without question to someone who spent it on something I never agreed to fund. I understand why they say that, but here is what I have come to know clearly. In the 2 years since the phone rang on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, those years were not wasted. The love I gave was real, even if what I gave it to was not. The person I became through those 11 years, the patience, the precision, the deep and practiced capacity to stay calm and build the case and wait for the right moment, that is not something I regret. It is, in fact, exactly what I needed to be when the truth finally arrived. I was ready for it. And I was ready for everything that came after. I am Celeste Webb, forensic accountant, senior partner, owner of a well-built deck and 2 golden retrievers who have never once lied to me about anything. This is my life. I built it. And I intend to keep every single square foot of it. The quiet drama, the quiet ones always have the loudest stories.